The court has reviewed the evidence. You are hereby remanded into custody. Do you understand these terms?
Yes, Your Honor.
The court has reviewed the evidence. You are hereby remanded into custody. Do you understand these terms?
Yes, Your Honor.
She woke up before the alarm rang, not because she was rested, but because her mind would not slow down. The morning light slipped quietly through the thin curtains of her small apartment, painting soft lines on the wall. She lay still for a few seconds, staring at the ceiling, listening to the distant sounds of the city waking up, cars passing, a neighbor's radio murmuring, life moving forward as usual, even though today did not feel usual to her at all. This was the day she had been thinking about for weeks. The courthouse visit was not something she wanted, but something she had to face. She slowly sat up, rubbing her hands together to warm them, not from the cold, but from nervous energy. She reminded herself to breathe, slow and deep, the way she had learned long ago. She moved through her morning routine carefully, making tea, washing her face, choosing simple clothes, nothing expensive, nothing flashy, just clean and respectful. She tied her hair back neatly and looked at herself in the mirror. For a moment, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Her eyes showed strength, but also the quiet weight of responsibility. She did not come from wealth or power. Her life had been built through effort, discipline, and long nights of study. She remembered those years clearly, working part-time jobs, learning in crowded classrooms, living far from family, learning how to stand on her own. Those memories gave her strength now, even if no one in that courtroom would ever know her full story. As she stepped outside, the cool morning air hit her face, grounding her. She locked the door and walked toward the bus stop, watching people hurry past her, each one focused on their own lives. No one knew she was heading toward a room where every word would matter, where power and pride often decided more than truth. The courthouse came into view slowly, tall and imposing. Its stone walls felt heavy, as if they carried the weight of countless stories, victories, failures, justice served, and justice denied. She paused for a brief moment at the steps, looking up, reminding herself that fear would not help her today. Inside, the building smelled faintly of paper and polish. Footsteps echoed through long hallways. Her hands tightened around the folder she carried, holding documents she had reviewed many times. She knew her facts. She knew her position. But still, a quiet tension lived in her chest. She had heard stories about the judge long before this day. People spoke of his wealth, his education, his sharp tongue, and his confidence. Some admired him, others feared him. He was known as someone who commanded the room the moment he entered it. She had imagined him many times, but imagining was different from standing in the same building as him. As she waited outside the courtroom, she noticed how differently people were treated. Lawyers in fine suits moved freely, speaking confidently, while others waited silently, eyes lowered. She felt the invisible lines of status and power that filled the space, lines that were never spoken but always understood. She took a seat on the bench, closing her eyes briefly. She told herself that respect did not come from wealth, but from behavior, that dignity could not be taken unless she allowed it. These thoughts were not new. They were lessons life had taught her again and again. When the doors finally opened, her heart beat faster. The courtroom was larger than she expected. High ceilings, polished wood, and a raised platform at the front where the judge would sit. The room felt cold, not in temperature, but in mood. She took her place calmly, aware of eyes glancing in her direction, some curious, some dismissive. She did not react. She had learned long ago that silence could be stronger than words. The judge had not yet entered, but his presence was already felt. The lawyers prepared their notes. Whispers floated through the air. She sat straight, hands folded, waiting. At that moment, this still morning felt like the pause before a storm. She did not know how the day would unfold. She did not know that one small decision made by the judge would change the entire room. But she did know one thing. She would not allow herself to be reduced, ignored, or humiliated, no matter what stood before her. This was not just the start of a court session. It was the beginning of a moment that would test pride, intelligence, and respect. And although no one realized it yet, this ordinary morning was about to become unforgettable. The moment the judge entered the courtroom, the air changed. Conversation stopped, chairs shifted, and everyone stood up in quiet obedience. He walked in with slow, confident steps, wearing an expensive suit beneath his robe, his posture straight, his face calm but distant. It was clear he was used to being watched, used to being obeyed. He took his seat without looking around much, as if the room already belonged to him. His eyes moved briefly over the papers in front of him, then across the courtroom, stopping for only a second on the woman before moving on. That single glance carried judgment, not of the case, but of her presence. As the session began, his voice was firm and controlled. Every word sounded practiced, polished by years of authority. Lawyers spoke with care, choosing their words wisely. Everyone seemed aware that one wrong sentence could invite sharp correction. The woman listened closely, her face calm, her back straight. She noticed how the judge interrupted others freely, correcting them, sometimes with a hint of sarcasm, sometimes with a smile that did not reach his eyes. Each interruption felt less about clarity and more about control. When it was her turn to speak, she answered respectfully, keeping her voice steady. She explained her position clearly, sticking to facts, avoiding emotion. She had learned long ago that emotion was often used against people like her. The judge leaned back slightly in his chair, fingers resting together. He asked questions that sounded simple, but carried a sharp edge. Each one felt like a small test, not just of her case, but of her intelligence. She answered carefully, meeting his gaze when required, lowering it when appropriate. She could feel the imbalance. He sat high above her, both physically and socially. His wealth, education, and title formed an invisible wall between them. At one point, he let out a quiet laugh, not loud enough to be called rude, but clear enough to be felt. Some people in the courtroom shifted uncomfortably. The woman noticed it, but did not react. She reminded herself that dignity was not something he could touch. He began to speak faster, more confidently, as if growing bored. His words became sharper, his tone colder. He corrected her phrasing once, then again, making small remarks that suggested she should be grateful to even stand there. She sensed what was happening. This was not just about the case anymore. It was about power, about reminding everyone who controlled the room. The judge glanced at the lawyers, then back at her. His eyes held a challenge. He seemed to assume she would stumble, that she would grow nervous, that she would shrink under pressure. But she did not. She stayed still, listening, absorbing every word, every movement, every shift in his tone. As minutes passed, his patience thinned. He drummed his fingers lightly on the desk, his confidence slowly turning into irritation. He was not used to calm resistance. He was used to fear. Then came the moment that changed everything. Without warning, he switched to a foreign language. His words flowed smoothly, clearly practiced. The tone was mocking, almost playful. A few people in the room recognized the language and exchanged glances. Others looked confused. The woman understood immediately what he was doing. He believed this language would place him above her, that it would confuse her, silence her, and remind her of her place. She did not respond right away. She kept her eyes lowered, allowing the silence to stretch. The judge mistook this pause for weakness. His lips curved slightly, satisfied with himself. What he did not realize was that the silence was not confusion, it was control. The courtroom waited, unaware that the balance had already begun to shift. The judge leaned forward, ready to continue his display, confident that he had won this quiet battle. But the woman remained still, her expression unreadable. Her calm presence unsettled something in the room. Even before she spoke, the arrogance had already cracked. And in that fragile silence, the judge unknowingly stepped closer to the moment he would never forget. The foreign words continued to fall from the judge's mouth with ease and confidence. His tone was smooth, almost casual, as if he were showing off a skill he believed no one else in the room could match. He leaned slightly forward, watching the woman closely, expecting confusion to appear on her face, expecting hesitation, maybe even fear. Around the courtroom, reactions were mixed. A few people recognized the language and whispered softly to each other, impressed. Others sat quietly, unsure of what was being said, but fully aware that something uncomfortable was happening. The language itself was not the problem, it was the intention behind it. The judge used the unfamiliar words to wrap his meaning in layers, making comments that sounded polite on the surface but carried hidden disrespect. He asked questions that were not really questions, but statements designed to corner her. Each sentence felt like a reminder of his power and her supposed limitations. The woman listened carefully. Her face remained calm, her breathing steady. Inside her mind, every word was clear, every phrase made sense. She understood not only the language, but the tone, the arrogance, and the small insults hidden between the lines. She thought briefly of the years she had spent far from home, living in a foreign country where this language was spoken every day. She remembered struggling at first, feeling lost, being underestimated, then slowly finding her voice. Her professors, colleagues, and friends had all spoken this language, sometimes kindly, sometimes cruelly. She had learned not just to speak it, but to understand people through it. Back in the courtroom, the judge paused, expecting a response. The silence stretched again, and his confidence grew. He straightened in his chair, clearly enjoying the moment. To him, this was a performance, and he believed he was the only one who knew the script. The woman's hands rested calmly in her lap. She lowered her eyes for a moment, not in submission, but in focus. She was choosing her timing. She knew that reacting too quickly would give him control. Silence, she understood, could be more powerful than speech. The judge repeated himself, still in the foreign language, this time with a sharper edge. His voice carried impatience now. He assumed she had reached her limit, that she could not follow him anymore. Some people in the courtroom began to feel uneasy. The tension was no longer subtle. It sat heavy in the air, like a held breath that refused to be released. The woman slowly lifted her head. Her eyes met the judge's for the first time since he had changed languages. There was no fear in her gaze, only calm awareness. Still, she did not speak. The judge mistook this moment for hesitation and allowed himself a small, confident smile. He leaned back, satisfied, as if the outcome was already decided. But inside the woman's mind, something was settling into place. She realized this was not just about defending herself. This was about dignity, not only hers, but the dignity of anyone who had ever been made to feel small through education, wealth, or language. She remembered the countless times she had been underestimated because of her accent, her background, her appearance. She remembered staying quiet then too, not because she lacked knowledge, but because she was learning when to use it. Now, the timing felt right. She took a slow breath, steady and deliberate. Her posture remained respectful, but her presence shifted. It was subtle, yet undeniable. The judge leaned forward again, ready to continue, unaware that the moment had slipped from his control. The courtroom held its breath. The foreign language that had been used as a weapon was about to become something else entirely. And in that suspended moment, before a single word left her mouth, the balance of power quietly began to turn. The silence that followed felt heavier than any spoken word. The woman remained still, allowing the moment to stretch just long enough to make everyone uncomfortable. She could feel the judge's eyes fixed on her, waiting, expecting her to break first. Inside her mind, however, everything was clear. She was not confused, not lost. She was choosing how to respond. She understood that this moment would define the rest of the day. The judge shifted slightly in his chair, tapping a pen against the desk. The sound echoed softly through the room. He spoke again in the foreign language, this time slower, as if speaking to a child. His expression carried quiet mockery. A few people in the courtroom looked away, sensing the humiliation being attempted. Others watched closely, curious to see how far he would go. The woman kept her gaze lowered. Her calmness was now mistaken for weakness. The judge leaned forward, his voice growing firmer. He believed he was in full control. But beneath her silence was years of discipline. She remembered the first time she had arrived in a foreign land with little money and high hopes. She remembered sitting in classrooms where she barely understood the words at first, feeling invisible. She remembered working harder than everyone else just to be seen as equal. Those memories did not make her angry. They made her steady. The judge paused again, expecting the silence to turn into embarrassment. His smile faded just slightly, replaced by confusion. He was not used to being ignored. The woman slowly raised her head. Her movement was unhurried, deliberate. Her eyes met his, and for the first time, something shifted. The confidence in her gaze unsettled him. Still, she did not speak. The room felt frozen. Lawyers stopped writing. Observers leaned forward, sensing that something important was about to happen. The judge cleared his throat and repeated his question once more, still in the foreign language. His tone was sharper now, edged with irritation. The woman inhaled quietly. Her fingers tightened for a brief second, then relaxed. She reminded herself that respect did not require permission. She opened her mouth slightly, then closed it again, letting the pause linger just a bit longer. The judge's patience thinned visibly. Finally, she spoke, but only one word. A single word in the same foreign language, spoken softly but perfectly. The pronunciation was flawless, the accent natural. The effect was immediate. The judge froze, his eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in disbelief. The smile disappeared from his face completely. The courtroom reacted in a wave. Some people straightened in their seats. Others exchanged wide-eyed looks. A quiet murmur rippled through the room. The woman remained calm, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. She allowed the moment to settle, knowing exactly what that one word had done. The judge hesitated. His authority suddenly felt less secure. He had assumed she would not understand, that she would remain silent out of confusion. But that single word shattered the illusion. He adjusted his posture, trying to regain control, and asked another question, still in the foreign language, but now more cautiously. The woman listened, nodding slightly. This time, when she responded, she spoke a full sentence, clear, respectful, and fluent. Her voice did not rise. It did not challenge him directly. It simply answered. And yet, the power in the room shifted. The judge's expression hardened, but beneath it was something else, embarrassment, perhaps, or the uncomfortable realization that he had underestimated her. The foreign language was no longer his shield. The woman continued to listen, her confidence growing not from pride, but from truth. She had not planned to reveal her knowledge this way, but she understood now that silence had served its purpose. The courtroom was no longer watching a powerful judge testing a nervous woman. They were witnessing the quiet collapse of an assumption. And the judge, for the first time that morning, realized that this was not going to be an easy day. The judge sat still for a moment, his eyes fixed on the woman as if he were seeing her for the first time. The confidence he once carried so easily now felt forced. He cleared his throat and shifted in his chair, trying to return to the authority he believed he had never lost. He spoke again in the foreign language, but this time his tone was different, slower, more careful. The mocking edge was gone, replaced by caution. He asked a longer question, one meant to test her limits, hoping to regain control of the moment. The woman listened without interrupting. She nodded once, acknowledging that she understood every word. Then she replied, not hurried, not defensive. Her sentences flowed smoothly, her grammar precise. Her voice was calm but confident, carrying no anger, no pride, only clarity. As she spoke, the courtroom seemed to lean toward her. Every word landed with quiet strength. She addressed the question directly, corrected a false assumption politely, and even added a detail that showed deep understanding of the legal matter. The judge's expression tightened, his fingers pressed against the desk. He was no longer enjoying himself. The foreign language that once made him feel superior now offered him no protection. A murmur spread through the room. People exchanged looks, some nodded subtly, impressed not just by her fluency, but by her composure. She had not tried to embarrass him. She had simply responded with intelligence and dignity. The judge interrupted her abruptly, switching back to the local language. His voice was sharper now, defensive. He questioned her background, asking where she had learned the foreign language. The question was framed casually, but the intent was clear. He wanted to expose her, to place her back into a category he could understand. The woman answered honestly. She explained that she had studied abroad years ago, working and learning in an environment where that language was spoken daily. She mentioned the challenges she faced, adapting to a new culture, earning respect through effort. Not once did she boast. Not once did she lower her voice. Her words carried weight because they were real. The judge listened, his face unreadable. He nodded slowly, though it was clear he had not expected this explanation. The power dynamic had changed, and everyone could feel it. He tried to regain control by moving quickly to another point in the case, speaking faster, using technical language, hoping to overwhelm her. But she kept up, answering clearly, calmly, correcting herself when needed, asking for clarification when appropriate. She did not rush. She did not shrink. Each response chipped away at the image the judge had built in his mind. At one point, he paused mid-sentence, realizing he had made a small factual mistake. The woman gently pointed it out, not accusing, simply stating the correct information. The courtroom went silent again. The judge hesitated, then nodded, acknowledging the correction. It was a small moment, but powerful. For someone like him, admitting a mistake in front of others was rare. He adjusted his robe, straightened his posture, and continued, now addressing her with a different tone, one that held respect, even if unwilling. The woman noticed the change. She did not smile. She did not react outwardly. She simply continued to engage, focused on the facts, focused on fairness. The humiliation the judge had intended never arrived. Instead, something else filled the space: accountability. People in the courtroom sensed it. The shift was undeniable. This was no longer a display of power. It was a reminder that intelligence and dignity could not be controlled by wealth or title. As the session moved forward, the judge avoided returning to the foreign language. He kept his questions neutral, professional, almost careful. The woman answered each one with the same steady confidence. By the end of that exchange, the room was no longer watching a woman being tested. They were watching a man being humbled. And although the judge would never admit it aloud, he knew one thing with certainty. He had underestimated her, and he would not make that mistake again. The courtroom no longer felt the same. What had once been heavy with control and quiet intimidation now carried a different kind of tension, one shaped by awareness. The judge sat straighter, his movements more measured, as if every gesture now required thought. He began the next phase of the proceedings with a noticeably different tone. His voice was still firm, but the sharp edge was gone, replaced by formality. He addressed the woman directly, using her name instead of referring to her vaguely. A small change, yet everyone noticed it. The woman felt it too. The shift in respect was subtle but real. She maintained her composure, answering questions clearly, aware that the eyes of the room were no longer watching her with doubt, but with curiosity and growing admiration. The judge asked questions related strictly to the case now. No tricks, no displays, no attempts to overpower her with language or authority. Each question was measured, professional, almost cautious. She responded the same way she always had, calmly, honestly, without embellishment. Her confidence did not rise from pride, but from preparation. She knew her facts. She knew her truth. The lawyers on both sides adjusted their approach as well, speaking with more care, watching the judge closely, sensing that the usual hierarchy had shifted. At one point, the judge paused to review a document. His brow furrowed slightly as he read. The room waited, silent. When he looked up, he asked her to clarify a point. This time, his question carried no judgment, only inquiry. She explained patiently, breaking down complex information into simple terms. Her ability to communicate clearly impressed even those who had initially dismissed her. The judge nodded slowly, making notes. He did not interrupt. He did not rush her. For the first time that day, he truly listened. The woman noticed something else too. The way people in the audience leaned forward, the way some smiled quietly, as if they were witnessing something rare, not a dramatic outburst, but a quiet victory of dignity. The judge called for a short pause, giving everyone a moment to breathe. As people stood and moved slightly, low conversations filled the room. Many glanced toward the woman with new expressions: respect, curiosity, even admiration. She remained seated, hands folded, breathing slowly. She did not celebrate. She did not feel proud in a loud way. Instead, she felt steady, grounded. When the session resumed, the judge's demeanor remained controlled, but something in his expression had softened. The confidence was still there, but the arrogance had faded. He addressed the woman again, acknowledging one of her earlier points, agreeing with it openly. That acknowledgement carried weight. It was rare, especially from someone like him. The woman inclined her head slightly in response, accepting it without comment. As the proceedings continued, the judge became more careful with his words, avoiding assumptions, asking for clarification instead of making conclusions. The room felt balanced now. The power no longer leaned entirely in one direction. The woman realized that this moment would likely stay with the judge long after the case ended, not because he had been embarrassed, but because his certainty had been challenged. She knew what that felt like, having one's assumptions quietly dismantled. By the time the session moved toward its conclusion, the transformation was complete. The wealthy judge who had entered the room expecting obedience was now engaged in genuine dialogue. The woman who had arrived prepared to defend herself had done something more. She had changed the tone of the room. Without raising her voice, without disrespect, without aggression, just by standing her ground. And as the judge announced the next steps in the case, his voice steady and neutral, one truth remained clear to everyone present. Power did not always belong to the loudest voice or the highest seat. Sometimes, it belonged to the one who remained calm long enough to let the truth speak for itself. The courtroom was quieter now, but the air still hummed with tension. The judge leaned back in his chair, reviewing the documents in front of him. His movements were precise, careful, as if each gesture needed justification. He no longer spoke quickly or condescendingly. Each question measured and professional. The woman remained calm, her posture straight, her hands folded in front of her. She had realized long ago that composure was as powerful as words, and that confidence came from knowledge, not bravado. She listened carefully, processing each question, each pause, each subtle glance from the judge. It was during this quiet that the truth of her background slowly became apparent to the room. She explained, clearly and calmly, how her education abroad had shaped her, how she had studied the foreign language fluently as part of her work and life, how she had navigated challenges in unfamiliar environments, always learning, always adapting. Her story was not one of pride, nor of boasting. It was simply the truth, but the effect was undeniable. The judge, who had expected to dominate through language and status, was now forced to reckon with reality. He had assumed she was inexperienced, unaware, easily impressed, and none of those assumptions had held. Observers in the courtroom could see the subtle shift. The lawyers, once confident in their roles, began to adjust their approach, treating her with careful attention rather than assumption. The audience, initially quiet and reserved, leaned forward slightly, drawn to the unexpected revelation of her capabilities. The judge cleared his throat and attempted to regain authority, but the power dynamic had already shifted. The weight of her truth and composure made his attempts feel less absolute. He asked questions about the case with renewed caution, avoiding sarcasm or intimidation, speaking directly to her knowledge and experience. She answered each question with clarity, explaining complex points in simple, understandable terms. She anticipated potential misunderstandings and addressed them calmly before they could become issues. Her words carried weight not because they were loud, but because they were precise and informed. The judge tried once more to assert dominance, using legal jargon and references meant to confuse, but she navigated the questions with ease, correcting small mistakes politely but firmly. Each correction was subtle, respectful, yet unmistakable in its impact. The courtroom felt the shift, as respect quietly replaced arrogance. At one point, the judge paused mid-sentence, glanced down at his notes, and nodded, acknowledging her explanation. It was a small gesture, but for someone like him, it was significant. The acknowledgement was a recognition of her competence and the truth of her words. Her composure never wavered. Her tone remained calm, yet it carried authority. The courtroom, once a place where status and wealth dictated perception, was now a space where knowledge, integrity, and dignity held equal weight. By the end of the session, the judge had regained professional control of the proceedings, but he had changed, subtly but irreversibly. He no longer underestimated her. He no longer assumed superiority based on wealth, title, or language. The moment had taught him a lesson in humility, respect, and fairness. The woman quietly gathered her papers as the session concluded. She had not sought to humiliate or embarrass, yet her presence and intelligence had left a lasting impact. She had demonstrated that real power is rooted in knowledge, self-respect, and the courage to respond calmly under pressure. As people began to leave, whispers spread through the room about the remarkable exchange, about the calm, composed woman who had met arrogance with dignity, about the wealthy judge who had been unexpectedly humbled. It was clear that this day would be remembered, not for dramatic confrontation or loud arguments, but for the quiet, firm demonstration of truth and integrity. And as she stepped out of the courtroom, she carried with her not only the satisfaction of being heard, but the knowledge that respect cannot be demanded. It must be earned through patience, skill, and unwavering composure. The judge watched from his bench, a subtle tension still lingering in his posture. He had expected obedience, surprise, maybe even silence, yet he had received none of that, and he understood, in that quiet moment, the full weight of what had happened. And though no words were exchanged about it directly, the lesson was clear. Arrogance can be dismantled not with anger, but with knowledge, dignity, and quiet confidence. The courtroom had emptied slowly, the echo of footsteps fading against the polished floors, yet the weight of what had just happened lingered in the air. It was not the usual hustle of legal proceedings, but something quieter, subtler, yet profoundly impactful. The wealthy judge, once so confident, now carried a new awareness, a recognition that his assumptions had been challenged in a way he had not anticipated. The woman gathered her papers carefully, her hands steady, her expression calm. She had done what she came to do, not through confrontation or theatrics, but through quiet confidence and careful preparation. Every word she had spoken carried intention, every pause measured, and every gesture deliberate. It was not about proving herself to the judge alone, but about demonstrating the power of dignity, knowledge, and composure. Outside the courtroom, whispers began to spread, lawyers and observers discussing the unexpected turn of events. Many were impressed by her ability to handle pressure, to respond in a foreign language flawlessly, and to remain composed under intense scrutiny. It was rare to see someone stand their ground so gracefully against someone with so much authority. The judge remained seated, reviewing notes, but there was a subtle shift in his demeanor. He had learned something important, perhaps not immediately acknowledged aloud, but deeply felt. For the first time that day, he recognized that wealth, status, and intimidation could only carry one so far. True influence came from respect, truth, and the courage to respond when challenged. The woman walked down the steps of the courtroom with quiet confidence, aware of the glances and murmurs behind her. She felt no pride in arrogance, only the calm satisfaction of knowing that she had maintained her integrity. She had faced an intimidating figure, remained composed, and allowed the truth to speak for itself. In the following days, the story of her encounter spread quietly among those who had witnessed it, not as gossip, but as a lesson in humility, resilience, and intelligence. People spoke of the woman who had turned silence into strength, and who had reminded everyone present that authority is not absolute. The judge, too, would carry this experience, perhaps reflecting on it privately, reconsidering how he treated others. The lesson was subtle but permanent, a reminder that even the most powerful figures can be humbled, not by confrontation, but by calm, measured responses rooted in knowledge and self-respect. For the woman, life returned to its usual rhythm, but the moment lingered, a quiet victory that did not need fanfare. She had proven to herself and to others that composure, preparation, and courage could shift perceptions, that dignity was a shield more powerful than arrogance, and that respect, once earned, could alter the balance of any room. The courtroom, once a place where hierarchy and intimidation dominated, had been transformed in a single session, not through drama, but through a lesson in humanity, patience, and quiet strength. And though the judge continued his work, issuing rulings and maintaining order, the subtle memory of the day when assumptions were challenged would remain with him, a reminder that intelligence and courage often speak louder than wealth or title. And so, the story ended not with dramatic applause or confrontation, but with a lasting impact on everyone present, a reminder that dignity, preparation, and the courage to respond thoughtfully can shift even the most intimidating situations, leaving a legacy far stronger than any display of power alone. It was a day that no one in that courtroom would forget, a quiet testament to resilience, intelligence, and the unspoken truth that respect is earned through action, not assumed through position. And in the end, the woman's calm strength became a lesson for all who had witnessed it, an unforgettable demonstration that true power lies not in wealth, in title, or in intimidation.